Hi, everybody. I'm here with Aakash Mittal. And Aakash was a fellow student, I would say, at the University of Colorado Boulder when I was there studying my doctorate. And what degree program were you working on at the time?
It was saxophone performance with a secondary emphasis in jazz studies.
Yeah. Wow. So, the way that he and I worked together is that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think all saxophone majors were required to take a semester on clarinet and flute. Is that what the deal was?
It was that specific jazz emphasis,
Okay.
requiring clarinet and flute. Yeah.
Okay. And did we do more than one semester? It seemed like we did longer.
I know we definitely had one semester together. It does feel like we did longer. I feel like we
Okay.
covered a lot in that
Yeah,
semester.
that's true. We covered a lot. So that's, I mean, when I was there, I taught those lessons for the jazz doublers that had to take the lessons, and I taught a lot of the undergraduate students, like freshman and sophomore year, and they would get lessons with Dan sporadically throughout that time, and then they would transfer up to him. So I did a lot of fundamentals work and etudes and scales with the undergrad students. Um, but anyway, as I was writing this book, Desert Impasse was fairly soon or early in the book, and I will completely admit that I did absolutely no research on like world music or anything like that. I just started noodling around with this G A flat, and then it just happened to turn into a harmonic minor melody, and it made me think of the desert. I love watching movies. I'm a big movie buff, and I grew up watching classic stuff like Indiana Jones. And that just made me think of something from Indiana Jones and like camels, the cliche walking across a desert. So that's how it came to be. And then of course it just made me think of you because I know you're writing music now with a lot of Indian influence and other influences. So tell me a little bit about that and share with us on that.
Absolutely. So a lot of my background, my roots are in playing jazz and Black American music, and improvisation. So I'm originally stemming from playing in bands like doing the blues, playing jazz standards, improvising around that. And around that same time, I I was a teenager and I developed an interest in Hindustani music, which is also part of my heritage. My dad is from North India, and Hindustani music is the classical music of North India, whereas Carnatic music is the classical music of South India. So I've been studying with a teacher named Pratush Banerjee in Calcutta since 2009. And I started going over to Calcutta to study with him. Those lessons were mainly me trying to play the traditional music on saxophone. And my teacher, who is a sarod player, which is like a Indian stringed instrument, um, he would sing the melodies because it's all oral tradition, mostly oral tradition. There is a notation tradition as well that's been developed, which is super fascinating for anybody who likes notation because it's a cool and different form of notation than what we do in the West typically.
Okay.
So yeah, I would study with him. I got a fellowship. I lived in India for a couple years. I'm currently studying vocal music. That's actually what I was just practicing right before this. And a lot of my own composing is about uh, is kind of creating my own voice through all of my interests in these different elements.
Okay. Can you go back and talk a little bit about the vocal music? Our sound got cut out just a little bit there. What was the vocal music thing you said?
Oh yeah, no problem. Just that I am currently studying Hindustani voice with Samarth Nagakar, who is a great Hindustani singer out here on the East Coast. And part of my interest in that is often my instrumental lessons with Pratush Banerjee would end with Pratush saying that to really learn this music, I had to learn the vocal tradition because the vocal tradition is where it stems from. And
Right.
one thing that was very inspiring to me in India is that instrumental musicians um, are able to and expected to be able to sing note for note what they play. So if you were to go, you know, up to a musician after a concert typically and ask like, "Oh, I really liked this thing that you did in the concert. What was that?" Instead of pulling out a score and like pointing it out, what people would do is sing it to you. Be like, "Oh, I did this and this and this," and so there's like a musical memory and then audience members are often informed, so you can actually hear like sort of the solfege, they call it sargam. You can hear someone sing that back to you and like understand the concept. So that kind of ear training is really cool and inspiring to me, and I want that to be part of my own musicianship.
That's fantastic. I absolutely love that because I love that music and how, and you're so right about it being influenced and really just the foundation in vocal music. Um, I I was a vocalist before I picked up a clarinet, so I started the clarinet halfway through high school. So I feel lucky that I have a vocal music background because I think it helped me learn quicker. And I already had an ear. I don't have perfect pitch or anything like that, but I had a good ear and I could harmonize and things like that. So it helped a lot when I started to play. And it still helps me, especially with like how I shape my air and breath support and how you take time like a singer takes time, you know? So that's fantastic. That's so exciting. So, when we're through, I would love for you to send me some links to some of the things that you mentioned, especially about the instruments and maybe some of the teachers that you were talking about, and then I can share that with the people in the group. That would be really nice.
That's great.
So I'd love to know what your opinion is on Desert Impasse. I know it's just an etude and it's just sort of like inspired by something, but I'm curious to see what you think about it.
Well, from a technical, I don't know if this is where you're going with the question, but from a technical clarinet standpoint, I love anything that gets us taking challenging fingerings, right, and like working them repetitively. And so it sounds like a lot of what this etude is about for you was like working the right hand little finger. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So that's something that like I'm really into doing in different ways with my own students as well. Is like we try to find those. I call them finger busters. I think there's lots of words for it. Um, trying to find those intervals where like our fingers are need to be strengthened. And I think there's like literal strengthening of the muscle that has to happen. Like I remember practicing this stuff on clarinet and saxophone in college, and I would get that kind of like weightlifting soreness here after working on like very certain kind of like exercises with the little finger. Um, so yeah, from that standpoint, I think like totally cool. It's kind of interesting that like it made you think, I guess, of like harmonic minor, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting to hear you say that because when I first was checking it out, I thought of the G as the root, but it sounds like for you the G is the fifth, if
Yeah.
that's the case for harmonic minor, which kind
Yeah.
of for me, like flips it around a little bit. But that's totally cool. Um, from a what am I thinking? From a cultural standpoint, what we call harmonic minor, in Western music is called Kirvani in South Indian music, and a lot of North Indian music adopts South Indian music like modes and elements because North Indian music is like historically South Indian music plus the Persian influence is what created North Indian music. Um, so a lot of mixing of different cultures there as well. This was during the like 1700s, 1700s is when that happened.
Okay.
Um,
I
yeah,
didn't
so
even
here
realize that there was a difference between like North and South Indian music. I had no idea. So that's very intriguing and now I want to look into it more.
they have like similar sort of cognate terms, and yet they're very different musics. Like I have been studying North Indian music, so I can really follow along with that. And when it comes to South Indian music, I don't know what's happening. It's different
Oh,
enough.
wow. Wow.
Like I don't really understand the form. I don't know how musicians are thinking exactly. So kind of interesting. Yeah. So worth checking out. So, in terms of harmonic minor, I do think it's fun when you do the research to like find what are the different names that like people are using, right, for different scales. Um, what I'll say is like what's interesting about raga music is like in music theory we can reduce them to scales. However, they're not scales alone. They're like specific phrases, right? So instead of having a harmonic system of music, it's actually like a melodic and rhythmic system of music. Um, I don't know enough about Kirvani to like go in there and know like, oh, did you use Kirvani phrases or not? You already admitted to having done, no research, so you're kind of
Yeah.
using it as a mode. right?
Yeah.
Which is cool. I guess one thing just to nerd out on harmonic minor, what's fascinating about it is like it's a scale. Harmonic minor itself is like a scale to derive harmonies from, right? For the minor mode, right? And so I'm kind of fascinated by the way that we like to take chords and try to turn them into scales, but scales are also not really chords. Um, either. I don't think,
Yeah.
like they're very different. And as a jazz improviser, like to me, that's a big difference. Like if I'm improvising with chords, that's different than improvising with scales to me.
Yeah.
Uh, like C minor seven major or C minor major seven is a totally different thing than I'm going to improvise with C harmonic minor
Yeah.
uh, to me. So anyway, I don't I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but um, what else was I gonna say? Yeah, what's interesting about, I guess the last thing I'll say about it from a cultural standpoint is I'm very curious like where, because this harmonic minor sound or the sound with like a flat second, major third, and then like flat six, major seventh, which in North Indian music we call Bhairav. Um, that sound from the like Western lens, I don't know, does like typically like in soundtracks and all kinds of stuff like evoke this kind of like exoticism,
Sure.
right? And which is like I'm very curious like where that came from, like who was the first person who did that, Most Indian music is not that. Like North Indian music for the kind of sound that like Kirvani is in, or if you have like a flat second, that's usually associated with the morning time. So different modes and scales are performed at different times of day. So if you're doing
Oh.
something that's like sa re ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga re sa, that's like a morning raga. Whereas if you were to do sa ni re ga ga re ma ga Lydian ga ma pa da, oh, I'm getting the pitches wrong. Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. That's like an evening raga yeoman that you would perform, around like 6 to 8 o'clock at night. And so, because most concerts these days happen in the evening, you're much more likely to hear that. Um, there's some, like one of my favorite ones is a midnight raga. So you perform it like around like super late at night or midnight. In India, there are festivals that go all night long, so you can hear the whole progression of like evening to night to morning, and then the concert end at 6 a.m. with the morning ragas. So when I was checking out the etude, from a cultural standpoint, what came to mind was like, okay, like this is kind of a morning raga type of vibe. Um, and yeah, I guess like yes, India has desert, and of course, like there's many other landscapes. Like where I studied in Calcutta, it's like very tropical and has like a mangrove kind of climate, if that makes sense. It's at a delta, so it's kind of more like New Orleans, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Where my family's from in New Delhi is like very like flat plains, so it's almost more like Texas,
Huh.
like flat plains, hot, but also kind of tropical and humid.
Okay.
But I have gone to like Rajasthan and Jaipur and did like a camel camping trip where we rode camels into the desert and camped, and it was a tourist thing. And
Yeah.
Rajasthan is a desert, and which is more like Colorado, because Colorado is also a desert, right? Like Colorado, Arizona, Southern California, that's all desert. So it's like arid, dry. The dirt and rocks are different. Um, so I'm just going and riffing. So I should stop. But the last thing I'll say right now is like I'm so touched that you like thought of me and dedicated this etude to me, and that you found some inspiration and in our friendship and in our work together. I know working with you was so tremendously beneficial to
Oh,
me. Like
thank you.
what I learned with you, I'm still passing on to my students and teaching them I'm teaching the Weber and Concertina to 3 people right now. So that's all because of you, because you
Aw.
taught, so uh, anyway, those are my thoughts.
Well, thank you, and you were definitely one of the memorable students that I worked with, obviously. But and I've been really like distantly very proud of what you've been doing. You know, I kind of watch you from a distance, and it's nice to catch up a little bit too.
Absolutely.
So, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the etude. If you'll hang out, and you can always throw in your 2 cents. And I'm going to share the screen real quick and just show a few things as people start to practice. So this etude has two versions. There's the B flat version for your traditional B flat clarinet, which can also be played on any instrument, any clarinet in the clarinet family. But if you go to the back of the book, there's also a low C version where some of the things are just taken down an octave essentially. So you get to work on those low auxiliary keys on a low C instrument. But this one is all about practicing that right hand little finger, so G to A flat, and then up here D to E flat. And what's interesting is, yes, that's a big part of it, but you're going to have a lot of A flat going to B natural, and that's a totally different thing to work on, A flat to B natural. So that can be quite a drill in itself too. So we're not just doing this, but we also have that in there too in the melody. And when I think about playing this, I think about it starting really distant, like you just see some camels on the horizon in the desert, and the mist is in the wind, or sand is blowing around, and it just progresses to where that scene gets closer and closer to you. So in the middle, when it says with intensity, I'll show that part here. That's when you're at the closest proximity with the camels or the people traveling in the desert, and the action is just right there next to you. So that's like really loud, and then it starts to progress again away, and we get more and more distant all the way to the end where it just fades out. And so that's kind of the character I'm going with as far as how to shape the page. And then as far as shaping the timing, I like to have a lot of flexibility with this one. So I'll play just like the first 8 measures, and notice how I'm just going to almost treat it like a cadenza. Almost, not quite. Oops, ran out of air. Probably should have taken a breath after that 4th measure, which you can. On a better day, I would have done a little bit better. But the more flexibility, the better. And I'll record this a little bit later and also share my full recording. But I'd love to hear little improvisations. People are certainly welcome to add some notes. Like in the intensity part, I'll scroll that down. Starting here in measure 25, that's where I like to add some notes, so you're welcome to do that. And get as dark of a character as you possibly can in that part. Is there anything that you would say, Akash, as far as musicality or shaping, pacing?
My main thoughts are I like how you're opening it up to some improvisation, and that's where my heart
Mm-hmm.
lies. And I also love the sort of different ornamentations that can be added. So it could be really fun for people to practice their harmonic minor scale and then also experiment with some ornamentation. Um, so, for example, do you want to share that again,
Oh,
or I can
yeah.
put
I'll
a
pop that
version,
back up.
and then I'll play.
Okay.
Let's see. So, if I were to go, so one ornamentation that's really straightforward is just kind of like going from a lower note to a higher note, like so. Right.
Oh, I
So
love that.
I mean, actually, part of your etude is like I'm going from A flat to B a couple times. So, right, and so that's like one type of ornamentation that's used at least in Hindustani music. Another one would be like kind of doing the opposite, going up and down from the note. So, or doing like a full turn. And then you can hear in there, I'm also trying to do some bends, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's called a meme. So if you were to sing it, it'd be like, na, 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 or something, right? And that's a really good one because you can just cover that hole slowly from left to right with your ring finger and decrescendo a little bit as you do it to get the na effect. Or from C to B is really good. When I'm relaxing my embouchure a bit. So from there, I would like take pieces of this and then like add my own kind of flourishes, right? So like as people get comfortable with the scale and with those fingerings, because you have to be really comfortable with that A flat to B to make that possible, it opens up something like this. Let me try that again. So even kind of doing that, like will like
Yes.
it's like both sounds great, and it's also kind of reinforcing the technical thing that you're trying to learn there, right?
Sure,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and I mean, for me, like this just feels like the beginning. I feel like there's so much that you could use for material with this, right? And then um, just kind of jam and do it again and again and expound on it and create more and more variation within that mode.
That was fantastic. I'm going to listen to that a million times and try to copy that as much as I can. Thank you for doing that. That was so informative because, talking about it is one thing, but really hearing it is a totally different thing. And I can hear all that vocal coming through. That's really cool. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Well, that would be my other thought is, if students are up for it, try singing a phrase of it, right? Like see if you can sing a phrase with it, either on like an ah or really any syllable.
Sure.
Um, yeah, and that can be so great for internalizing. So.
Great. Well, what's new on the horizon for you now? What are you doing now, and what are you gonna do when this whole thing's over with the pandemic? I guess that's the question.
The biggest thing on the horizon is I am releasing a new album with my trio, which is called Awaz Trio. It has a South Indian percussionist named Rajna Swaminathan playing mridangam and a really wonderful jazz guitarist named Miles Okazaki. And then I'm mostly playing saxophone on it. Uh, it's a series of compositions. The album is a series of compositions that I wrote on this trip to India that I spoke about earlier. So they're all based on Hindustani evening and night ragas that I've like abstracted and deconstructed and remade in my own imagination. So it's also not really Indian music anymore either. It's kind of just my own. I'm really excited about it, and
Okay.
that will come out publicly this spring, I believe, so March or April. So I'm kind of gearing up for that and getting those CDs printed. Um, what else is happening? I'm teaching at Face the Music. That's super fun and very cool. So I have some projects to do with that. Actually, one of my ensembles is learning a piece in Raga Meg Malhar, which is a monsoon raga performed during the monsoon season.
Oh.
Another group is learning music by Anthony Braxton, who's a great composer from the AACM, who also plays all kinds of clarinets in addition to other instruments. He's got like a contra bass clarinet or something that travels in a coffin, basically.
I knew I'd heard that name, so yeah, okay, it rang a bell.
He's so huge. And he does a lot of extended techniques and stuff on it.
Okay, yeah.
It's cool. So we're learning some of that music. So yeah, the immediate horizon is working on that, and then doing my own practicing, taking these vocal lessons, and just continuing to develop as a musician.
That's fantastic. Well, Akash, thank you so much for joining me on this chat. And you're welcome to post a recording in the group. That would, I'm sure everybody would really appreciate hearing that if you'd like to and you have the time. And follow along as we go through the book, and any feedback that you have would be greatly appreciated. But thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.